the dream crushers are at it again. Let's put up this headline. Takeaways from the Supreme Court of the United States affirmative action cases. Conservatives may overturn precedent allowing race as a factor in admissions. So there are two cases before the Supreme Court with regards to affirmative action. It is the Students for Fair Admissions versus the President and Fellows of Harvard, and the Students for Fair Admissions vote versus the University of North Carolina. I want you to know straight up that the Students for Fair Admission are also people who have strong affiliations with Justice Clarence Thomas, as some of us may recall, has a disdain for affirmative action. I just got to put that out there, so I want you to know who you are dealing with. So the Supreme Court is poised to say that colleges and universities can no longer take race into consideration in admissions programs, a decision that will likely overturn decades-old precedents and could diminish the number of African American and Hispanic students in higher education. Now, during a marathon session lasting almost 5 hours, the justices heard from a total of 5 lawyers. 3 argued on behalf of Harvard and the University of North Carolina. 2 others, both former clerks, I gave you a sneak preview of that, of Justice Clarence Thomas, argued for the conservative group Students for Fair Admissions behind the challenge. With a 6-3 conservative liberal majority, the question may not be whether the court will strike down affirmative action, but how far it will go. Jordan.
That's horrifying. This is something that I think we're all better off as Americans if that is a factor in college admissions. Personally speaking, like I said before, I went to Youngstown State. That was, a much more diverse student body than my high school, even just growing up outside of Youngstown. And while I was there, Trayvon Martin was killed, and we had conversations about that. That really opened my eyes to police brutality, because I had people in my class who were saying, like, look, this happens all the time. This is just the first time there's cell phone footage or something like this. This is the first time social media is talking about something like this. And just having a diverse classroom and a student body offers totally new perspectives. And institutions have recognized this over the years, that a diverse student body is important to educational outcomes. And what people are arguing in opposition to that is, no, it should be based purely on merit, and that's it. Race shouldn't be a factor. And that's not healthy. That's not good, because all that does is perpetuate the long systemic effects of Jim Crow, where you have tethered, property taxes and property values to education funding, and that just creates decades and decades and decades of systemic disenfranchisement and discrimination, where schools in predominantly Black areas that have been redlined are at a greater disadvantage of wealthier white areas, and that would then just extend to college admissions. And that is, I can't say exactly how I feel because we're not allowed to swear on this show, but it is totally not right. And I can't believe we're even this close to it. But this is Clarence Thomas has been vocally opposed to affirmative action in college admissions, despite acknowledging himself he was the beneficiary of a program like that to get into Yale. He has said it himself in the context of these conversations in the Supreme Court. So I don't know. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't have high hopes, but I really hope that some people have some moment of awakening where they recognize that this is something that we should consider in terms of college admissions.
And Justice Thomas has certainly been working towards this end for a very long time. And colleges and universities are microcosms of a larger society. It is important. And it really is, race is really only one variable that they are considering from other variables, but I don't see them calling out those other variables. Let's put up some language of how, because I want to make sure that people understand what we're talking about. And the ACLU did a very good job of laying this out. Race conscious policies such as affirmative action aim to address racial discrimination by recognizing and responding to the structural barriers, Jordan was talking about that have denied underrepresented students access to higher education. Race conscious admission practices allowed universities to consider a student's race as one factor. Let me underline, let me bold it, let me put an exclamation point on that right there. One factor. It is not the only factor. It is not even the major factor. It is just one factor, one variable in looking at a student in a very holistic way. Now, Justice Ketanji Brown really picked up on this. So I just want to go ahead and skip to what she had to say about this. She said, why is it that race is doing anything different than the over 40 other factors the school considers? They're looking at the full person. Go ahead, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. That is the question. Why are these people so fixated on race? They weren't fixated on race when it comes to ultra wealthy white men. See, we've always had affirmative action in the United States of America. Let's be clear about that. But that affirmative action has been for the wealthiest among us. And usually that type of ultra wealthy were white men. And of course, some white women benefited from it too. So I ain't gonna let them off the hook either. It has been for the ultra wealthy. That kind of affirmative action they ain't got a problem with. But when it comes time to try to level the playing field, and there's a lot of work to do in this country to level the playing field, now all of a sudden they got questions. Now all of a sudden they got concerned. Not concerned about the truth and reconciliation processes that need to happen in this country. Not concerned about the generations of African Americans and other people of color, and even some women in this case who have been stumped upon because of the clear affirmative action that took place at the founding of this nation for ultra wealthy white men. They ain't got no concerns for that. We got to correct these wrongs and we got to make some crooked paths straight. Shame on the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Congress, y'all need to go ahead on and expand the court, baby. What you waiting on? Expand that court, because this court is taking us to hell.